Hello everyone, my name is Ann Théato and welcome to episode 63 of the Psychic Matters podcast. Thank you so much to everyone who's taken the time to write a written review. They're just beautiful to read and to hear, and I appreciate each one of them so very much indeed. I've now had 100 5-star reviews, which is absolutely incredible. And if you would like to leave your written review, you can leave more than one. If you've written one already, you can leave a second one if you like. You can do that on Apple Podcasts directly or on Podchaser. And there's a link on my website to make it super easy for you. So go to antheater.com and click on the podcast tab and you'll be led to that. You'll be pleased to hear that I've caught up on all of my workload since returning from Ireland a couple of weeks ago, and I've been thinking about the types of courses that I want to offer over the next year. Currently, I'm very into my scrying, and for those of you that don't know, scrying is all about using different kinds of psychic tools as a platform for our psychic knowledge to appear, either in our mind's eye or in the psychic tool itself. And I use scrying a lot in my psychic detective work, and if you would like to come and learn with me, I do have a 6-week scrying development circle. You are welcome to come and join and try it out. I've got a fantastic group of students that work together. Do come and join all of us. We will be working with wax and water, mirrors and crystal balls, treacle and sand and stones and bones and all kinds of things. And we start tonight, 5th of May, for 6 weeks. The details are again over on my website. And then taking all this psychic work that I love so much, take it all a stage further. I've been studying privately a lot of remote viewing techniques. And again, I use those a lot with both my psychic detective work and my mediumship. And I'm combining different types of remote viewing with my mediumistic awareness. And I've created the most, if I may say so, amazing mentorship program, which begins in January 2023. It's called The Art of Remote Viewing. So if you have been interested in remote viewing and you want to learn the secrets of your own extraordinary innate psychic ability, please do come and join me. Details are on my website, antheato.com, ANNTHEATO.com. under events and courses. And now I'd like to introduce this week's podcast. Clairvoyant Medium and Tutor Chris Jacobs has led a life that is far from ordinary. In this episode, Chris speaks openly about the challenges of his difficult and traumatic childhood, which led him away from his home as a young teenager and into the arms of the spiritualist church. Chris talks of the incredible mentors that he has had in Glynn Edwards and Gordon Higginson, the powerful and ever-present influence of the spirit world, and the importance of good training. Settle back, get comfy with a good old cup of tea and a slice of cake. You are going to love this episode. Chris Jacobs, CSNU, Clairvoyant Medium and Tutor, welcome to Psychic Matters.
Thank you for having me, Anne. It's my pleasure.
Oh, Chris, it's so great that you've come on the podcast. I've known you a little while now. We've trained together in a few things, and I know that you've been working as a spiritual medium for a great number of years with great respect. But it says on your website that you have been aware of spirit since a very early age. So let's go right back to the beginning. Where did this contact with the spirit world come from in your experience?
Well, as the old adage goes, it's always best to start at the beginning. And for me, I never truly recognized spirit as spirit. I was born in a convent because my mother was underage. She was 15 when she was pregnant with me. And her father was a Southern Irishman and her mother was English. He wanted to send her to the Houses of Magdalene back home in Ireland. But my grandmother stepped in and said no.
You might want to say, for listeners who may not know what that is, what the Houses of Magdalene actually mean.
The Houses of Magdalene were places where unmarried mothers went and they were worked in the laundry. And often the children that they'd given birth to while they were there would be sold off, basically, or found out to parents who couldn't have children. And so I would have been lost in that system. Both of my grandparents are avid Catholics. And so my grandmother stepped in here and she talked to her own priest. And were told that they had certain places where my mother could go. And this was in a convent down in Bristol. And so I was born there. And there was a photograph taken of me on one of their little altars where the light's shining in. And it was evident then that spirit were very much present, because there were a number of orbs surrounding me on the photograph. And it blown up, and you can very, very clearly see the face and the habit of a nun.
Oh, wow.
Who stood right next to my head. And so it is very, very clear there. Now, when my mother had given birth and she was now 16, my parents were made to marry. My mother was 16, as I said, and my father was about 19, I think. And so they had to go and live with his parents. My mother's parents were not great people. They were very middle class and very stuck up in a lot of ways. My father's were working class people, down to earth. And so this was not the done thing back then in the 60s, really, even though it was supposed to be a time of liberation. And going forward a bit here, that as I was growing up, my childhood experiences were not great. They were not great. To put it in a nutshell, I was beaten black and blue by my mother. I was physically, mentally abused. And I was also sexually abused by other people, And all this, going through this, I was always aware of somebody there. But being from a Catholic background, I was, I would refer to the person or the people I would see as God or messengers of God, which essentially they were. And they were always there, and I would physically hear them as well as mentally hear them. I would see them, and they were the ones that always prepared me for when something was going to happen. And in a way, they taught me to step aside through the beatings and really helped me get through my childhood here and even into young adulthood. As I say, there's a lot more I could say than we've got time for. But in a nutshell, they were the ones that taught me how to step aside, so I didn't feel the pain as much. And they also helped me get through those days. Now, there was one specific time that really meant something when spirit were closer than close here. And this was the night before my 13th birthday. And my birthday's in October. And we lived up north then, so it was very, very cold at this time of year. We didn't have the luxuries we have now. And as a punishment for something or other, I don't know why, I was meant to sleep in the bathroom. I was made to sleep in the bathroom over a little one of those put-you-up beds, which was balanced very precariously over a bathtub and used to keep falling into. And this night, I felt the lowest it could ever low. And for a child, that was not good. And I sat there and I was weeping. And I'd opened the bathroom window and I was looking at the stars in the sky. And I started speaking to God. And I'm saying, I don't understand why this happens, and I can't stay here anymore. And I literally asked if I could go home. Now, I didn't know what home was, but in a vague reference, I knew it would be heaven. And when I said that, the voice came out of the darkness, a physical voice, that was in the bathroom with me and spoke to me and said, "We understand, we know." And it brought a lot of comfort to me. And they were saying that, yes, of course, I could go home if I wanted to. But if they promised that they would get me out of that situation I was in, would I stay? And they said it wouldn't be now, wouldn't be today, wouldn't be tomorrow. It would take a little time, but you'll know when the time is right. And they made that promise with me. And I took this as all as perfectly natural. I didn't realize the phenomena that was happening there and then. As a child, it was just because it had always been evident that spirit were there, and it was just natural to me. They were my family, they were my friends, they were closer to me than anything. And so I said, okay, I would go along with that. And so one thing led to another, and I stayed. And then it was when I got to 15 years old, I'd had them a final beating from my mother. And I just heard in my mind very loudly, "It's time." And that courage just suddenly came in me. It swept over me like like I cannot explain. And when I turned to my mother, who was lying on the couch, after she'd beaten me and looking quite euphoric, may I add there. And I just said, Mum, you always said to me I could leave anytime I wanted. And she looked at me and I just said, that time's now. And so I opened the living room door, walked out the door, and Spirit said to me, just go into your room and collect your Bible. Now I wasn't a Bible reader or anything like that. It was the New Testament that all school children were given when they first joined the secondary school. And so I thought nothing of it. I went in, closed the door behind me. What happened then was my mother rushed out of the living room and gone to the door I would have gone out of to try and grab me. So I knew what Spirit had done. So I grabbed the Bible and I went out the other door. And I left home and I never went back at 15 years old. As I said, this is all in the book and we'll be going to a little bit more. But Spirit really helped me. They kept me safe. I walked the streets for 2 days. I didn't know I was 15, a very young 15-year-old, very naive. I didn't know nothing about life. And I'd always shielded myself. I always protected myself. I was so painfully shy. It was unbelievable. But I followed their direction. I did what they said. And I lived to tell the tale.
Where did you go, Chris, at that time, at that tender age? I know you said you walked the streets for 2 days, but where did it take you?
I walked some miles away from where I lived. And I felt uncontrollably drawn to this. There was this little static caravan park. And this was after I'd left, and it was coming darker. And I drawn there and I went to this caravan park and I was drawn to the shower block. And there was a cubicle that went in. I could lock the door. I locked the door and I slept there for the night. In fact, I slept there both nights. And then I was drawn to walk into the social services.
My goodness.
And let myself be put into care then.
And so when you say you were put into care, were you taken in by another family or what happened?
No, I'd walked in and my family was already known to the social services, and it's very different to what it is nowadays. And I just walked in. I saw the lady I knew. I said, I've left home. And she says, I know. I said, no, I've left home. I will not go back. Don't ever ask me what happened because I will never tell you. But just know that I could never go back there. And so she looked at me, smiled and said, okay, I need to get a few things sorted first. She was very kind, but she first had to drop me off at the police station because I was reported missing. And the irony of this was this policeman put me in this room. It wasn't a cell, but it was a room. And he locked me in. And I just laughed because I thought, there's no way I'm leaving. You don't need to lock me in. In fact, you might have to drag me out.
Yeah, absolutely. And where was your father then, Chris, at this point?
My father and my mother had divorced when we were young. It was kind of drifted in my life, in and out of my life. And that was about it, really. So they were not together.
And you say we. Do you have brothers and sisters?
I do. I have 4 sisters. I was the eldest of them.
And did they all have the same sort of experience?
No, not all of them. They all suffered a little bit at Mum's, but not as bad as I did, because she believed I looked like my father, and I think she blamed my father. And so I came under everything for it. I also want to say here as well, I think I was about 9.5 years old, coming up 10. I remember my mum giving me a particularly vicious beating on the stairs for no apparent reason either. And as this blow hit my face, something snapped in me. And I looked at her in another way. I knew I looked at her in another way because I could see it in her face, and it rather took her aback. But at that moment, there was no love for her. That moment had changed everything. There was no love. And I actually said to you, there is no love here for you, Mum. So she was always Mum, well, basically she was a mother, but she was never a proper mum.
And in the years that followed, I know I'm fast forwarding over your entire life story, but just fast forwarding with me. Is your mum still with us? Did she ever explain her behaviour?
My mother's no longer with us anymore. No, and she never did, and we never really went over the subject. I ended up having to look after my mum in later years. She died pretty young. She was only 56, but she was an old 56. The problem with my mother was she was an alcoholic. She was a real alcoholic. And it was an unwritten rule that she never drank during the day, but if we went anywhere, she always had to be home by 6:30, because then she would start her drinking from then. But, I could never, when I bought birthday cards, Christmas cards, it would be plain. I could never use the word love in it. And there was just something in me that would not allow that at all.
Goodness me. So let's go back then. So you're 16, you're in care. And so, sorry, were you with a family, did you say, at that point? What happened?
No, I wasn't. After, I had been taken to the police station, the social worker came and picked me up, and she said, I found you some accommodation. And it was a very small boys' home. And there was only about, I don't know, altogether 6, 7 of us, something like that. So it was very small. It was very intimate. I'd left only with the clothes on my back. And when I went, the couple that were running, we had referred to them as aunt and uncle. And I remember as she looked at me and she said, I suppose that's all you've got, what you're dressed in. And I said, yes. Now, here was a child that was not used to having clothes. In fact, any underwear I had to steal from friends, or surreptitiously borrow them, But I didn't know any, at that time, that's needs were must. And I remember taking me to this room, and it was a big closet, really, and there were all these clothes in. She sized me up very well, told me to hold my arms out, and piled all these clothes in front of me. And I looked at these clothes and I looked at her, and I said, are these mine? And she said, yes. And I remember at that moment breaking down in absolute tears, that somebody could do this for me. And so I stayed in this boys' home. Now, a lot of the other boys that were in this home were shall we say, a little roguish. They'd been put there. And so I wasn't. I was given a certain amount of trust, and, because I was there on my own volition. And I finished my school there, and then I went and started a job and college at the same time. And just before my 17th birthday, so I was still 16, it was deemed that really, you know what, I could look after myself. And so I got my own little rented studio apartment, little flat, and looked after myself from then on.
Wow, that's amazing. And so did you then go to work? What did you train as? What was your first jobs?
Because there was such a lack of food, I was always hungry. There was no, we were desperately poor. And because Mum being alcoholic, so there was never enough food in the house. And it made sense to go into catering. So I just went straight into catering, where I knew there was a ready source of food.
Wow, that's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. It's so sad that you go into that because you were so hungry. How did that play out for you? Was that a passion of yours?
No, it wasn't a passion. It was a lot of hard work, let me tell you, and long hours. But it served its purpose, and it did it for quite some time. And I'd finished school, and I got my O levels, and then I went on to college. I did various courses and things, and then I thought. So suddenly one day it hit me, and while talking to Spirit, and I'm sure it was them that were saying, "You got all these, all these certificates. Why not use them if you're not happy here in catering?" And so I went into the civil service and ended up working for the civil service for quite a few years after that. But I always kept a loose connection with catering as well, through friends who would say, "Oh, come and work for us part-time," and,
Yeah. And so Spirit walks alongside you to the age of 15. They help you by asking you to go and get the Bible from the room while your mother's in the wrong part of the apartment or the home. And so you go out the back door. And then, how does Spirit accompany you through these years where you're doing your catering and your civil service jobs?
I've always done that, because I've always been, even as an adult, I was always shy, withdrawn, scared, if you like. And I could never really trust people. It took a long time. And I'd always protected myself. I mean, the friends, if I had friends, you could count them on less than one hand there. And Spirit were always there. And the one poignant part was what I needed to learn about them, the spirit world. And how they did this was, one day I was on the top deck of a bus, and I was coming into Blackpool, and I was meant to go to the bus terminal, the terminus, and the rhythm of the bus, I went into some sort of trance-like state on top of the bus, and I knew I was safe because once the bus would stop, I would, I'd get off at the end. But all of a sudden, this voice shouted very loudly, "Get off, get off, get off." And so I came to very quickly, flying down the stairs of the bus, and got off at this stop. And when I pulled myself together, I suddenly realized, oh, this is 2 or 3 stops earlier than I should have been. But as I looked up, I was stood outside a spiritualist church in Blackwell. And so I looked at this, and the voice said to me, "Go in." Well, it was Wednesday afternoon, and it was now about 2:10. And I looked, and as I looked up at the main doors, I could see a padlock, and I said, "I can't go in. It's locked. It's not open." I was told to look to the left, and there would be some stairs going down. So I looked, there were the stairs, and I was told to go down them. So I did. And I was told to open the door. I did. And once I opened this door, there was a service going on in that afternoon. There was an elderly lady down on the platform there. And she stopped, she looked up, And the strangest thing, it still gives me the shivers today, was, "Oh, come in. I've been expecting you. Take a seat down the back there and stay after the service, and you and I will have a chat." And that is where I learned about spirit from that day on, that the people I referred to God was not God. It was the spirit world, and that they'd been with me all that time, loved and protected me.
Wow, that's such a beautiful story. And how did the lady say that she knew you were coming? Did she explain that she'd got a message that you were coming, or she just felt it, she sensed it? How did she know?
I think she was told. She never really said. But, the way she said it to me, it was as if, Chris is coming at 2:15. Tell him to sit down.
Yeah.
And it was just the way she had this reassuring knowing. And she was such a lovely, lovely lady. And I only remember her first name, Billy. She was very elegant in a way, and she was in the late 60s, beautiful voice. And she was so reassuring that, you're coming from the background I came back, you're always wary of people. But I was not wary of her at all. The way she came across to me, it was just really, really lovely. I felt instantly at ease. And just did as I was told. I sat there and I listened to that service, and I was just astounded. And talking about messages, I didn't know what messages were. For me, messages were little notes.
And so what did you do from there? Did you start to attend regularly, or what happened? You made a friend, obviously, out of Billy?
Well, after we'd had our talk and a cup of tea, I was told that Friday night, there was an open circle at 7:30, and it might be an advantage for me to attend. And feeling somewhat excited by it now and intrigued, I did. And on that night, I met a couple of incredible people, and who would figure in my life for quite some time. I was sat there and I was watching people, different members of the audience, all getting up and saying, some of it was, I thought, oh, and some of it I'm thinking, oh God, I'm shrinking in my chair, And there was the medium at the front. Her name's got long gone from my head, but I remember this. It was an older lady, and she was very kindly, and she's pointing out to people, oh, come on, get up. And then right at the end, she says, there's one more I know who's got a message here, and they really need to stand up and give it. And you get that sinking feeling. And I started to try and sink into my chair and disappear. And she pointed straight at me. Well, I felt from my face to my toes burn. And so I just tried to say I hadn't, but that was not good enough. So I had to get onto my feet. And at this moment, curiously enough, I thought, I'm not going to get out of this. I'm just going to make anything up. And and so that way I'd get away with it. So I just casually looked around the room, and I saw this lady with really flame red hair and quite a tall and big lady for a lady. And I thought, she'll do, and I just gave her a little message, talk about, she had a nursing background and everything. And she looked at me and she said, quite correct, young man. Well, I was blown off my feet. Here's something I thought I'd made up. And she just said it was correct. And then after the service, she came up to me and said, I can see you need developing and you have a beautiful gift. I'm willing to open and start a home circle for you if you would like that. And I did, and she became like a second mom to me. I sat within her circle for nearly for 20 or 30 years.
Wow, that's a long time. How beautiful.
It was. And I also had the fortune as well to be introduced to the president of that church. And I don't know if any of your listeners would know, but it was the late, great Betty Wakelin, who also had a hand in my tuition, as it were. She used to put the fear of God in me, but she was a lovely lady.
Wow. Tell us a bit about Betty.
She was the president for a long time of Blackpool Church. She was also well known at Arthur Findlay College, and she was a lovely, lovely lady, a brilliant trance medium and a very good medium. And she really has helped quite a few mediums along the way. You'll know Billy Cook, of course. She's had a hand in his teaching as well. And she was just there in the background for me. But most of my training was actually done in this circle of my circle leader, Elsie. And also Gordon would have a hand in that as well, Gordon Higginson.
And for those who listen who may not know who Gordon Higginson is, do tell us.
Well, he's the late, great president of the Arthur Findlay College in Stansted, was, in my mind, a renowned first-class medium, and I don't think we'll see the like again. He, for me, his mediumship was outstanding, but for me, what always stood out was his talks, and the talks about spiritual and the spirit world and everything. He could hold you captivated for hours, and he was a brilliant orator. And I also was fortunate to see some of his trans mediumship, where he produced some physical phenomena.
What sort of physical phenomena did you see?
You saw the ectoplasm. For me, it was the ectoplasm, and I was just blown away, and how it was just billowing from him. And it's strange substance. It's like a sheet, but it's not. You can see through it, see into it as well. It was really, really, and that smell that comes with it, like a really earthy smell. And all I remember that one time, it smelled like cabbages, but I believe he'd had cabbage that day. So, I could smell that as well. So I was fortunate to see these things. And also, not long after that, I met also the late, great Glynn Edwards, who was to remain a friend for 30 odd years up until his passing. And he was my mentor, really, taught me a lot of things. Those who had met him never forgot him. And he was a lovely, lovely man and a really, really good friend. He took me places and introduced me to people. And I really didn't know at that time that I was amongst these legendary mediums, and there were a lot more. And if I'd had only known what I know now, my goodness me, it would be a different story.
But how beautiful. You had the experience of these wonderful mediums, and they were able to influence you just by you watching them and observing their work.
Yes, I was. The wonderful thing about it, I was so thirsty, I just drunk it all up. It was lovely to watch them. And, I didn't want to, emulate them, but I could take what I needed from them, and they just taught me so much. Whereas today, there's not that same finesse, charisma in some of them. Demonstrating mediums, unfortunately, and I'm sad to say that. But these people really did have something that really captivated you. To me, the messages they gave were the icing on the cake. It was everything else. The knowledge that they had, and you could see the influence of spirit with them so much. It was phenomenal, really phenomenal.
I mean, some might say, certainly my mind goes to the fact that since a very young child, you've been able to see, perceive, know, hear, listen to, have conversations with the spirit world. And not everyone's had that. So is it easier, do you think, for you as a medium to trust in the spirit world because you have had that awareness since you were tiny? I think it's a struggle for some people to really, really, truly believe that what they're getting in their mind is actually intelligence of the spirit world. I'm just interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I can quite understand that. I think it's a hard question for me to answer because I've always known it and I've known no different. It's always been there. What actually came the test for me was as a child, I was more open, far more accepting to it. because they were protecting me in a lot of things. But it's as I grew older and I started attending courses and starting to learn, then it became more difficult because there were certain procedures to follow, certain ways to do. And I do think, sometimes, it's good to have a training, but sometimes you've still got to retain that openness within yourself to understand that maybe this way is not right for me, because I started to try and implement at one point so much what I'd been told that I got so much in a mess and within me that I spoke to Spirit and I begged for help. And I was told, listen to yourself, listen to us. And so I had to pare it back a bit and take it back to them. I'm sure you've heard this and know this, Anne. You're a very great medium yourself. But with mediumship, it's either there or it's not, that connecting. Yes, we can learn a bit as we go on in life. But I think the truth of the matter is, it depends on what kind of lifestyle you've had, I think, as well. If you've had not such a good road, like you're not as trusting, and you will always doubt yourself. If you doubt yourself, it naturally in life, I think you can bring that into mediumship. But on the other hand, the flip side, I'm going to say it's also good to question. It is very good to question, because I remember all the mediums of old always teaching me was, always look for an explanation first, especially in the trance and the physical side of mediumship. If it can be explained from natural causes, you must always look for those first. And then if it can be, it's not spirit. If it cannot be, then there is an intelligence there at work.
It's amazing to think that you have had this beautiful tuition from Glynn Edwards, and you've had this wonderful influence and tuition from Gordon Higginson just by sitting with him and watching him working and listening to him speaking. And I know you've also worked with Mavis Patilla, is that right?
Yes, I did a little bit with Mavis. There's quite a few mediums. I've forgotten the names, and I was privileged one night. Glynn came to me and says, right, we're going this evening, I'm demonstrating. And he says, you're coming along. I didn't have much option. So he said, you're coming along. And he said, that's as much as he said. And he said, because he just said it would be a surprise. And so I said, okay, because I was asking who you're demonstrating with, where are we going? All the usual things that, a young person would say. And when I got there, wow, it was a surprise. There was Gordon Higginson. There was the late, great Jesse Nielsen, who was a Jewish medium. And I got to say hello to Doris Stokes.
Wow.
My one time meeting her. She was not very well, I have to admit, at that time. So I went to dinner with all these, and there were others, but those were the ones that stuck in my mind. So we went to dinner afterwards, and I can just sit in there, never said a word, just absolutely in awe of who was at this table and listening to me. And they were just down to earth, ordinary people.
That is like an ideal dream, isn't it? Who would you like to go to dinner with? Well, all of those people would be wonderful. And you've actually done it.
I did, yeah. But again, at that time, I didn't, you really don't appreciate it as much as I would now, when I think back on it and thinking, why didn't I say this? Why didn't I ask that? Why didn't all these great things I could have done.
Yeah. What's your big takeaway from Glynn Edwards? Because you've spoken about your great takeaway from Gordon Higginson being his, where you said, we won't see the likes of him again. What a wonderful orator he was, and how his talks about the spirit world were just out of this world and so amazing. What's your big takeaway from the work of Glynn Edwards?
Well, firstly, the takeaway from him, I loved him. He loved me. We could be a prima donna, as some people could, but I loved the way he talked. He could captivate an audience, and the way he talked, you could be sitting on the hardest chair, the wooden chair, and I have done in the past, 2 hours sat there, and you wouldn't even know your bum was numb, because he was really good at his speaking. And he really was a very, very passionate about his mediumship, and he never stopped learning. And he always said to me this: "You'll never reach the top because you always need to learn." And I always remember that, just keep yourself open to learning, because all life is evolutionary, isn't it? It's all learning, and he taught me those great things. And as I say, he was a very great friend. And I think the sadness was that, I spoke to him just 2 days before he passed on the phone on his mobile in the hospital. And I just knew that was our time was coming to an end. And it was so, so sad, really was sad. And we left it there where I said, "I'll see you soon." And he said, "Yes, I'll see you soon." And I think we knew.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way to end a beautiful friendship. And it must have been very difficult for you, because these wonderful teachers of yours and all of these people that you've met through spiritual churches, they sort of became your family. They became your community, where you didn't have your mother and father to really support you.
They did, they really did. They had a real positive effect on my life. But I think there was one person who was not in the spiritual circle, and I don't think I know. And I talk about her in my book, and her name was Mari. And I say that she was the angel in my life. She was the mother of all mothers for me. She was Italian. She had that hot Latin blood. But she was the one that broke through all the barriers that I'd had and got to the heart of me and understood me and showed me a life that was far better than the one I'd experienced, and was so loving and so giving and so generous. I have said where I've wrote in the book, and I've actually put the title there, my angel, and she really was my angel.
That is so beautiful. What a lovely tribute you've just spoken there to her.
Yeah, and well, sadly she's passed now, but there's not a day I don't really think about her. The beauty of this life is, what I would say to all those who are suffering now and have suffered, a lot of it is perception in our mind too, and I've had to go through it time and time again. But if you want to see the best in life and really mean that, you can, because there is so much beauty in this world left to see. There is so much beauty in people if we but look and see that. And through my spiritual work and my connection with spirit, I've learned to see all of that. I've seen it, and I can see into the heart of people now. And that's brilliant.
But you have learned so much from the training that you've done, from being around these people. I think you must have brought this with you to the earth, that you yourself are such a giving, loving, beautiful, gracious, kind person. I know you've gone out of your way to support me with some of my studies that I've done. And I've watched you work as a medium, and I've watched the kindness and the beauty of the way you hold a grieving person while you're delivering messages to them from their spirit communicator. And it's just so beautiful. I just really want to flag that up to you, Chris, that you must have brought that with you, learned from others, and you take that work forward, and it's exquisite.
Thank you, Anna. And for the listeners, I'm blushing at this moment with that. I think, I want to say something here that might be a little bit arbitrary, is I've been through so much pain in my life, and I'm starting to well up thinking about it here, but I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change that at all now. It taught me so much and gave me such empathy and compassion that when I talk to people, I understand, I know. And a lot of people say, especially the old mediums of old, when I used to speak to them, because they knew my past, they'd always told me I was going to be a good medium. And I said, well, why? Because of what you've been through. And I think that really good mediums, if you talk to them, they've suffered. They've suffered in their life. And it's taught them empathy. You know, when I've spoken to other people and friends, I've always said, well, there was only, you had two choices. You either became what you did or you became a rogue, you know, and that path was never open to me. It was always this one. And I don't regret a day of it.
So brilliant, Chris. And I know Spirit also said to you once upon a time, you will write a book. And you've mentioned it a couple of times through this interview, but tell us about that.
Yeah, I was told when I was very young that, you know, you would write a book. Well, I was told two things. I was told I would get on stage and be, you know, not stage, platform, sorry. I'd be on platform and would, you know, do the mediumship, and I would write a book. And to both, my answer to both things were, hell will freeze over. And so I've done the stage, and hell didn't freeze over. And then I was talking to somebody who said, you know, about my life, and they said, you know, you've really got a story, and I think you need to share this because it, you know, tells them of my life, but also the intervention of spirit and where spirit has been placed in that. Now, the book is called A Life Far From Ordinary, and it's my life with spirit in there. The book, its aim is to bring hope and, you know, to show people that, yes, we can overcome our worst tragedies and that spirit do walk beside us. You know, yes, mine is from a mediumistic point of view, but I believe those loved ones in the spirit that we all have don't want to see us suffer. They do walk beside us, no matter whether you can feel them, hear them, or sense them or not. But they are there to help guide you, to shine that tiny speck of light that will help you take that next step on your journey to bring relief and also to bring hope.
Beautifully put, Chris. Beautifully put. And when is your book going to be available for us all to read and devour? It sounds so fascinating with all these stories in it.
Well, hopefully it is going to be the end of May, and it'll be coming out through Amazon and I believe some bookshops. But I will put it on my Facebook page when it's available, and also on my website.
So fabulous. And you also, of course, do one-to-one readings. You do a lot of platform work. Just tell us a little bit about what you're offering out there in the world at the moment.
Yeah, I've done one-to-one readings for years. I still do that. And I can do it via Zoom, Messenger, Skype. I do mentorship programs, teaching workshops. I work at all of these. I work at various parts of the country. I do group readings as well. And the funny thing is, I know a lot of us will say, well, we get the people we need, but I really do get the people who need me that come to me. And that's what I love about our job, Anne, that you see these people, they come to you, and some of them are in desperate states. And to know that you could have brought that little tiny speck of hope and that little bit of relief, and you can see it in their eyes. There's no more worthwhile job in the world to me when you see that. And that does me good. You know, I don't need to be any big name. All I need to know is that I've helped, and I've helped the spirit world as well as this world.
So beautiful. Chris Jacobs, thank you so much for joining us here on Psychic Matters. It's been an absolute pleasure and totally fascinating talking to you.
Well, thank you. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And what sterling work you do with this, and long may it continue.
Thank you very much. I really hope you enjoyed the episode with Chris Jacobs, CSNU. You can find Chris on his website at www.chrisjacobsmedium glynedwardsgordon.co.uk. And do watch out for his wonderful book, A Life Far From Ordinary, which will be out very, very soon, hopefully in May, and it will be available on Amazon and in bookstores. And of course, I will let you know when it is released via our Psychic Matters Facebook page. So come and join us over there. And indeed, you could go to my website and sign up for my newsletter, which comes out twice a month, only when I have a new podcast episode to announce. So you're quite safe to sign up for it. I won't plague you with emails, just 2 a month. And I also put at the bottom of those newsletters about the podcast, the courses that I've got coming up. So if you are interested in podcast and my courses, do go to my website and sign up there. Show notes for this episode are also on my website. So all the resources that might have been mentioned in this episode and a full transcript are available. So don't forget, while you're over there, take a look at my remote viewing mentorship program as well, because I'd love you to join me for that in 2023. Meanwhile, wishing you all a fabulous couple of weeks. Don't forget Chris Jacobs' wonderful tip this week. He says, if you want to see the best in life, you can, because there is so much beauty in this world left to see. I hope you're able to see the beauty in the world around you this week. I'll be back in a couple of weeks' time when I'll be bringing you an episode all about the secrets of manifestation. Until then, my name is Ann Théato, and thank you for listening to Psychic Matters.